Good morning. Let's find our seats, please. All right, good morning. How is everyone doing? Yeah? Oh, we got some pictures going. I see hugs. God, I love the summit. Well, welcome to the 2025 Illinois Workforce Summit. God, this is a good-looking crowd. Give yourselves another hand. And I know we have about 150 virtual attendees as well, so I know they're good-looking too, so let's give them a hand as well. So virtual attendees, woo! All right, well, thank you so much. Welcome to this year's summit. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome our dignitaries for this morning to give us our kickoff. I would like to welcome to the stage First Assistant Deputy Governor for Budget and Fiscal and Operations, Amanda Elliott, and First Assistant Deputy Governor for Health and Human Services, Mr. Ryan Croak. Amanda and Ryan.
Here we go. I don't want to spill my coffee.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Andy. Thank you so much, everybody. I am delighted to be with you. I know that you have a very robust agenda, and I don't want to stand in the way of any of it. So I'll try to do my best to follow the 3 B's that a former boss of mine taught me. Be bright, be brief, be gone. When I walked in this morning, I was astounded, pleasantly, to run into Dr. Jason Klein, who's standing right in the corner there. He was my 8th grade teacher at Jack London Middle School in Wheeling, Illinois. And he's Mr. Klein to me, he's Jason to you, or maybe Dr. Klein. But before I dive into things, I do just want to say what a profound gift it is to teach and educate people. And Jason was one of the individuals who you knew right away cared about the life and well-being of the kids in his classroom, including me. And I think it would be a missed opportunity to not publicly say thank you, Jason, Mr. Klein, for devoting your professional life to the development of young people like myself, for instilling in people like me the feeling that you could do great things in your life, no matter where you may have started. And I know that, like Jason, so many people in this room are totally devoted to creating opportunities for folks all across Illinois who just want a chance to do better. Whether you're part of a local workforce investment board or part of the state workforce investment board, or you're working at a community college or as an employer, I think the thrust of this gathering is really about breaking down the doors of opportunity for people who just need a chance to get ahead on their education, get ahead on workforce development, and opportunities to succeed and thrive as they yearn and strive to build a life for themselves. So above all else, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for making time to get together and share your best ideas about how we can make Illinois an even stronger state when it comes to lifting up the workforce and breaking down barriers, whether it's an individual with a disability who's facing barriers, or a young person who maybe has had a hard go of it, or an adult who is striving for a better opportunity, a ladder up. I know that each of you has given a great deal of your personal and professional commitment in life to expanding the world of opportunity for young kids like me when I was a young kid in Wheeling, and for thousands, indeed millions of Illinoisans across the state. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and maybe move to the mic my much brighter and stronger colleague, Amanda Elliott, who is my counterpart in Governor Pritzker's office. Amanda is the first Assistant Deputy Governor for Budget and the Economy. I think you all know that right now our nation and our state are at a critical inflection point. I would say for many people a very scary and daunting juncture in our shared history. And we're working really hard with the agencies of state government in the Health and Human Services portfolio and in the Budget and Economy portfolio to make sure that to the maximum extent possible, Illinois is insulated from some of the goings-on in Washington, D.C. that pose real problems for families in Illinois. I won't belabor the problems. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the opportunities. But I want to turn it over to Amanda, who is not only my friend, but is somebody who I worked closely with at the Department of Human Services. And I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. She's a brilliant leader in state government who spent a great portion of her life in public service to others at the State Board of Education before she went to the Department of Human Services, and now with me in Governor J.B. Pritzker's office. So Amanda, why don't you take it away, and then I can jump back in if yes, so desired. Okay, very good.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. It's a complete, I was unprepared for how many people would be here, and it's incredibly moving to see all of you. When we pulled in the parking lot, I was like, oh, there are no spots. This is incredible that you all traveled to be here and spend this time together. Ryan and I both actually worked at the Department of Human Services prior to our jobs in the governor's office, and I think we know firsthand the amazing dedicated staff that work there, that support so many of your agencies in this state to help people. And I just want to say thank you. And I know that there are people just like you at all of the other state agencies and all of the other entities that are supported by those agencies. So thank you so much for being here and the work you do. As Ryan said, we are doing our absolute best in this state to insulate ourselves from kind of the craziness in Washington. But it's really, as we all see daily, completely unpredictable. So we are doing our best to make sure that you all can continue to serve those that you do, and we will need you moving forward to be partners as we work to make sure that you can continue to do the important services that you provide. So thank you so much for having us here, and I hope you have a wonderful conference. Yes, please.
I promised I would be brief. I want to add just a couple of other shout outs that I think are important. I want to thank 4 state agencies. I'll probably miss some, and leaders who are present here today. I see Ronnie and Julio. We have leaders from the Department of Employment Security, the Community College Board, probably the State Board of Education, and if I've missed any, you'll have to accept my sincerest apologies. I want to emphasize that state government has done some extraordinary work in perilous times to advance our shared mission. And I also, can I just get by a show of hands, those of you from the private employer community, those of you who are, can you just raise your hand? There's one, okay, terrific. I know there are others, I see another in the back. I want to really especially thank you all. I think much of the work that is a priority for everybody in this room is impossible without the meaningful partnership and participation of private employers in Illinois who believe in the public interest and the common good, as so many of you do. I would feel terrible if I didn't say that the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity has supported workforce development through important programs that you all know well, like the Job Training and Economic Development, or JTED program, and work related to the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, CEJA, the Community College Board, and its many devoted leaders and staff have helped more than 5,000 folks secure GEDs and supported more than 60,000 families in Illinois through a variety of services beyond supporting the most robust community college system, I think, in the country, at least one of the most robust. Our Employment Security Department, as you know, is helping folks who are navigating the fear and uncertainty of experiencing joblessness and are working in an innovative way with the state's technology and human resources departments to make sure that folks have the best possible shot at getting back in the workforce. And finally, last but definitely not least, and very close to my heart, is the Division of Rehab Services at the Department of Human Services. Vocational rehab, the home services program, pre-employment and training services. These are life-changing, life-giving opportunities and programs that Director Patrick and her team support. And I would just share on a personal note, both of my parents were deaf from birth. And after college, my father, who had a degree in engineering from the Rochester Institute of Technology, my mom went to Evanston Township High School. They were young people with a disability who were desperate for work. And well into their 60s, they're both gone now, but well into their 60s, they could tell me the names of the vocational rehab counselors that they worked with to secure employment in their early lives. And, you know, it's a struggle for many people with disabilities to find meaningful employment in our state and in our country. And the people who held my parents' hands and arms and who believed in their potential to be contributing members of the workforce and great parents, those people changed my life. And I think it's quite important to remember that the work that you're doing to help young people and adults find a job that brings their life meaning has a generational impact that can never be underestimated. I think back on my dad's records of letter after letter to employers, outlining his credentials, making crystal clear that he was ready to work, and the stories of him facing rejection after rejection, notwithstanding the fact that he was a highly qualified, incredibly smart and gifted person. And I want to thank every person in this room who's looked at the resume or at the face of a person with a disability and said, you know what, I want to give that person a chance. It's the reason that Governor Pritzker enthusiastically supported the passage and the advocacy surrounding the Dignity and Pay Act, which just earlier this year made it impermissible over time to continue the practice of paying disabled workers less than the minimum wage in Illinois. I think the work that you do to shatter stereotypes and low expectations and to really lift up the dignity of all people who just want a shot at work is as important as anything that anyone can do on this planet Earth. I want to thank Director Ronnie Patrick, my great friend and colleague Amanda Elliott. Without the two of these individuals, that state law would not be the law of the land today. They worked behind the scenes and on stage and everywhere they could go to make that possible. And it's going to change the lives of thousands of people in our state for a long, long time to come. There are many other great initiatives underway. Just yesterday, Governor Pritzker signed an executive order prohibiting the unauthorized collection or disclosure of personally identifiable autism-related data. Yeah, it's a big deal. I appreciate that. And that executive order is a strong signal to the federal government and to everybody across the country that Illinois takes the lives of people with disabilities seriously. And we know that everybody in this room does too. Another crucial initiative, and I'd invite Amanda to say more about it, she's really more of an expert than I am, is our effort to expand the opportunity to obtain a baccalaureate degree at our community colleges across Illinois. That initiative, I know, has generated some degree of debate and dialogue, and you could call it controversy if you like. But really what it's all about is fueling the workforce that we so desperately need, whether it's in nursing, where there are scores of openings that we need to meet, or in the behavioral health field, or in the trades, or in teaching. Yes, God love our teachers. We need to make it easier for people to obtain the advanced degrees and the baccalaureate degrees that they want. And for many people, the best way to do that is by attending the community college that's right a hop, skip, and a jump away from their front doorstep, because they might be parenting or they might be caring for an elderly loved one. And we need to make it easier, not harder, for folks to dive into the world of folks who have a bachelor's degree. And by expanding the ability of community colleges to support that mission without eroding or in any way diminishing our public and private four-year colleges and universities, it's just the right thing to do. And we really hope that the General Assembly will step up to the challenge of expanding the ability of our excellent community colleges to make more opportunities available to the people in our state. So I've said a lot. I appreciate your time. I wish I could spend a little bit with each and every one of you, or in the Stratton building next door. Feel free to stop by. We'd love to learn more about your local priorities and to support the great work that you're Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause to our first Assistant Deputy Governors. My name is Andy Lasasso. I have the pleasure of being the Chief of Staff. Well, it's my fourth summit, and I can honestly say this is the first time that I've been in the same room as Director Julio Rodriguez and our Madison County local director, Tony Furman, and I'm the only one wearing a tie. So, yeah, I'm usually the informal one getting ribbed about not wearing a tie, so thank you all. And thank you to those that are attending virtually as well. Your attendance is just as much, if not more important. Please stay tuned in, engage. We do have the Whova app for both in-person and virtual attendees. If you are in person, please, we have our Whova help desk out at the far corner right across from registration. And also online, there's a help button within the app that you can use for more assistance. There are table tents on each table that have the QR code for the Wi-Fi. Please use that. And 1 second here. I want to make sure I got notes here. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. All right, we were intentional about the schedule for this summit. So tomorrow we are scheduled. We will be out of here before 1:30, so please attend the whole thing. The final panel, make it your summit without industry, employers, and businesses. So thank you all so much. Just want to do a quick reminder that we do have just over 555 attendees.
I want to welcome and share. He is the former Chief Executive Officer of the National Skills Coalition. And if you're not familiar with their work, they work diligently to ensure every person in America is guaranteed skilled training for good jobs and economic prosperity. This is what we're all about, right? Building sustainable employment for our people so that they can have sustainable futures. Robert is a prominent advocate and thought leader in the workforce and in the aging and caregiving fields. We talk a lot about the care economy, and he's definitely a leader in that space. He has dedicated more than 25 years to advancing public policy and fostering general understanding of our most pressing societal issues. He's got quite a background, being recognized in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, CNN, Forbes, and the Washington Post. He was selected for the inaugural Care 100 list in 2020, and recognizing him as one of the most forward-thinking individuals in reshaping the caregiving landscape in America. We spend a great deal of time talking about the care economy, and he is certainly a leader in that space. Additionally, he was named as one of the Next Avenue's 2020 influencers in aging. Before he came to National Skills Coalition, he was the Executive Vice President of Policy at PHI, the nation's foremost organization focused on the direct care workforce. Again, the care economy is so vital to the success of all of our students, our families, our clients, and our customers. He directed its renowned National Advocacy, Research, and Public Education Division for nearly a decade. In 2021, he testified before the United States House Committee on Education and Labor, emphasizing the urgent care needed to strengthen our workforce in direct care economy. So I'd like you to help me welcome Mr. Robert Espinoza.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings from the state of New Jersey, though I did not fly in from Newark Airport, for people who are curious, which is why I'm here. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you for joining the summit. I'm really looking forward to and am honored to be invited to speak about what I have learned in my career about the needs of working people, of businesses, small and mid-sized, much larger, and where we are as a country, both nationally and in the state. I want to thank all of the individuals and entities who are responsible for this amazing summit. And one thing that I want to start with is I want to say that the issues that I'm going to be speaking about have become increasingly complex over the last few years. I began working in aging and long-term care in 2010. I worked at a senior center in New York City. I worked at a national organization. And I saw how society was evolving in regard to workforce development, in regard to healthcare, in regard to policy and policy decision-making. And the issues have become so complex, as you all can attest to, as I can imagine. And in recent weeks, we have seen additional pressures that I'm going to be speaking about today. This is all in the context of an uncertain future, right? We don't know exactly what kinds of policies will be enacted at the national level in different states. We have a way of influencing them, but what we're seeing is a variety of trends that I'm going to be speaking about today. So again, thank you. A few points about me. Thank you for the introduction. I recently wrapped up a stint as CEO of National Skills Coalition, which is a bipartisan policy group that focuses on improving jobs for workers in jobs that do not require a four-year degree, but usually require a high school education. And I'll be announcing my new role next week. I also worked for nearly a decade at PHI, which focused on improving jobs for more than 5 million home care workers and nursing assistants who support older adults and people with disabilities around the country. And for a while, I was a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. I also, shameless plug, I run a podcast called A Question of Care that aims to solve our country's caregiving crisis, one question at a time, one expert at a time. So I'm bringing all of those facets of who I am and what I've learned to today's conversation. I'll be talking about my remarks in 3 different stages, and I want to preview those before I dive into them. One is the reality that we are facing a range of disruptions that are reshaping our workforce in every part of the country. So the rise of AI, I think, is one that a lot of us have seen and gets quite a bit of attention all over the country. The second is an increasingly older population, a demographic of baby boomers who are every day 10,000 people turn 65, and because people are living longer thanks to advances in medicine and science, people aged 75 and older are the fastest growing segment of the US workforce, right? And so this has enormous implications, not just for the workforce system, but also for our society and culturally. The third piece is the reality that demographic shifts continue to transform who we are as a country. And in many ways, that's a good thing. In other ways, it creates friction and it creates uncertainty about what those communities and those populations are contributing to our country. And I'll talk about that as well in my remarks. There are incredible federal headwinds, and Illinois is probably well aware of that. We'll be examining specifically the risks and the questions that the new fiscal year 26 federal budget poses to the state and to the work that we do. And I spent several days and several Bloody Marys reading through that budget and trying to understand everything that makes sense in it. And so this is going to be my best attempt to try to figure out what it means for Illinois and what it means for a lot of us. But there are deep cuts, as you have all probably seen, to labor, to health and education agencies. There are also mentions around apprenticeships, around adult education, Medicaid, and there is stalled infrastructure funding and some mixed message about both state autonomy and limited or strained funding for states, right, which creates a very different dynamic for states. And then I'm going to urge everyone in the room, as I think many of you already feel and what I've done throughout my career, about the importance of breaking through silos and really seeing ourselves across differences and forming the partnerships that are so critical to the future ahead of us. Sorry, there we go. So I want to talk just a few points regarding the demographic trends. So AI is something that we see quite a bit of analysis on. There are both benefits and there are risks. And I want to say that, first of all, with the stat that Goldman Sachs did a study of AI and its impact on the workforce 2 years ago, and it showed that over 60% of US jobs are facing some level of AI exposure, and nearly 30% could be significantly disrupted. There are many implications for this. In many ways, on some levels, it's about making sure that workers have AI and digital skills and that they have access through the barriers that often prevent many people from accessing or acquiring digital skills. But in many other ways, it means that our entire workforce and economy is being restructured, right? There are a number of jobs that are being displaced. It's unclear the extent to which AI is creating or reinforcing long-held biases, and there are studies that are looking closely at that. But for people in the workforce and workforce development field, it means making sure that workers on one level acquire the digital and AI skills they will need as jobs begin reformed, but as people are displaced from jobs, knowledge roles for the most part, by AI, that they're able to rapidly reskill to take on those occupations. So for example, for 10 years, I worked with both employers and with state policymakers to improve direct care jobs. These are home health care jobs and nursing assistant jobs. They're larger than any other occupation in the US, and they make, on average, about $10 to $12 an hour. Most workers leave their jobs within the first 90 days, which means leaves millions of employers with job vacancies and older adults and people with disabilities without continuous care. So it's a crisis, right? What you see, and was speaking with a variety of home care businesses about AI, is that there are some benefits, right? For example, if we can figure out ways for AI and technology in general to assist with lifting people, whether in the home or in nursing homes, you can prevent injuries among an occupation that has one of the highest injury rates of any occupation in the country. Many employers struggle how to schedule people. Scheduling home care clients is one of the most complex tasks that many supervisors often have, because there are so many different levels of care that need to be scheduled, and because there are so many clients and it's constantly shifting, right? And employers are figuring out how to use AI to automate that and make it easier, right? But in many ways, direct care cannot and should never be replaced by technology, right? Direct care in many ways is very personal. It requires in-the-moment problem solving. For many people who are often isolated, it's their only source of contact with a human being, right? And it's very relational for people who live in nursing homes or assisted living or in their own homes. And so that's a risk that AI and technology can place. The second is that older adults by 2034 will outnumber children in the US. This is there are two facts going on here, two trends. One is that younger people are less likely to have children, and we're seeing that trend, but also the older adult population is growing, it's surging in so many ways. The care economy is under strain because the primary payer for direct care in this country is Medicaid, and yet Medicaid is also under attack and it's increasingly strained, especially at the state level, but also because so many of the supports that are delivered to people in their homes or in settings are often healthcare related supports, which are increasingly expensive, right? We also know that the people who have often been left behind by today's workforce and education systems, whether it's rural people or people with disabilities or Black and Latino people, others, they also run the risk of being left behind as our system rapidly evolves unless we prioritize the kinds of policies that take into account their unique barriers. All of this is to say that we need modern, unsiloed workforce solutions that create opportunities, real opportunities, especially in a turbulent federal environment with unpredictable consequences. What are some of the challenges here? The first thing I'll say is that polarization in this country, whether it's at the local and state level or at the national level, has been increasing over the last few decades, and there's a number of statistics to show this. One is that from the Pew Research Center that shows that in 1994, only 16% of Republicans and Democrats viewed the opposing party very unfavorably. Let's be honest, they hated each other, right? 16% in 1994. In 2022, that number rose to over 60%, right? That's something really heavy to hold, right? I grew up with parents who voted all over the board, right? And they would come home after voting and they would have their disagreement, and then we'd have dinner and we'd go to bed, right? This is the 70s, 80s for people who are wondering. But in 2022, that means that the lack of even a remote agreement with people of the opposing party is vanishing. The second point is that in 1994, just 10% of Americans held consistently liberal or conservative views, meaning that you might shift your opinion for who you vote depending on what that person said or what they stood for, right? In 2021, that number jumped from 10% to over 40%. And a year ago, I attended a lecture in DC by a researcher who studies polarization in countries all around the world, and she specifically studies what are the elements and factors that indicate when polarization in a country can lead to civil war. Right? And she was studying this in South America, in Africa, in Europe, and other places. And what she found is that the most significant element was whether or not people were choosing to live by people who were only choosing to live by people they agreed with, right? In other words, by neighborhoods or by zip code. And she showed a map that showed, yes, we are absolutely doing that, right? People are often making choices of where they buy or rent by the flags they see in people's houses. And that increases polarization, it decreases the ability to understand people who are different than you, right? We also see in a time in which short-term budget realities are displacing long-term strategies. We see the ongoing threats of funding cuts, the filibuster, continuing resolutions. We see shifting federal priorities that are destabilizing workforce and education systems. Frankly, civil debate on issues that used to have high-level bipartisan agreements. And we see that our siloed systems can't keep up through these debates or with our rapidly shifting economic systems, right? The reality is that our policy and our funding structures, they weren't built for today's rapid technological disruption, our demographic shifts, or our evolving labor needs. And so much of the work that we need to do, whether it's at the local or state level, or in my work at the federal and national level, is to make sure that we unite across those silos and that we ask people to think differently, to support working people, to support educators, students, learners, businesses, and everybody in that ecosystem. This is a trigger alert. This is an article from Bloomberg that talks specifically about the skinny budget that was introduced a few days ago. And what I did in advance of this conversation is I looked closely at the budget itself. I looked closely at a number of analyses on all sides of the aisle. And I looked at some of the analysis that many of you have read in Illinois to try to discern what is most relevant for this conversation. And so I'm going to cover in as kind of clearly as I can some of the key lessons. This is a hard graphic to see if you're not close to it, which is okay because I'm sharing it for two main reasons. One is that green indicates an increase in funding for that specific area, whereas pink, or peach, indicates a decrease in that funding area. If it's gray, there's no change. And that's specifically for the Social Security Administration. The size of the bubble, it's a bubble graph, indicates the size of that increase or decrease, right? And what you can derive from this are some of the findings that are captured here, right? We are seeing, for example, overall, $163 billion in cuts to non-defense discretionary spending. That's a 23% reduction from last year. It brings it to the lowest level since 2017. Now, and there's cuts, but there's also increases. We see a total of $1 trillion in defense funding, which is a 13.4 increase. And the first time it would surpass $1 trillion. We see a 65% increase in homeland security, much of which is dedicated to secure the border. We also see a 1.7 trillion total discretionary budget. The administration's approach also includes eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. It redirects any climate-related programs across federal agency. It cuts the Environmental Protection Agency by 55%. It dissolves federal agencies that the administration views as, quote, weaponized against the American people, end quote. And it shifts programs and responsibility to state and local control without the commensurate funding. And that's an important asterisk that needs to be included within that. What does this mean for education? And I want to start here instead of workforce to indicate that they're very much interconnected, right? We know that a person's journey through education from kindergarten all the way to post-secondary, it's a trajectory, right? It indicates whatever choices, whatever access you have to specific systems, to specific resources or people as early as elementary school or even before can dictate the trajectory you have all the way through graduation and beyond. What we see in that budget is a 15% reduction to overall education department spending. We also see, and alongside efforts to close the Department of Education entirely, this has been in the works for several months. Secretary Linda McMahon previewed this when she was first appointed. We see the elimination of Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant Program, which provides need-based grants to low-income undergraduate students. Federal work study. I was a federal work study student in undergraduate school at the University of Colorado at Boulder. It's also significantly cut in this budget. And we see $49 million cut to the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights. So if you feel that you have been discriminated on any federal protected category, like disability and deafness is one, your ability to seek redressal for that, your ability for it to be investigated, enforced, and ultimately compensated if it was the case of discrimination has been severely curtailed, right, in this budget. As it relates to labor, to workforce development and career pathways, the administration proposes a Make America Skilled Again initiative. It aims to overhaul federal workforce development by consolidating existing programs into state-administered block grants. It mandates that at least 10% be allocated to apprenticeships, which I'll talk about in a second. And it eliminates programs like Job Corps, which supports low-income young people from 16 to 24, and the Senior Community Service Employment Program, which supports older people age 50 and older in their employment trajectory. It reduces the overall Department of Labor funding by approximately 35%, and it shifts the focus towards skilled trades and reduced federal oversight. Again, with an asterisk that all of this comes with reduced funding and reduced federal oversight and technical assistance. Apprenticeships. We see, for example, that the goal is to create or support, not create, over 1 million apprenticeships annually, especially in construction, manufacturing, and skilled trades. However, there have been $18 million cuts in Department of Labor grants, right? Which would end apprenticeship outreach and technical assistance. It would shift that responsibility to the states at the same time that it's aiming to support this goal, right? There's a mention as well around short-term Pell. This was a goal of the National Skills Coalition to expand short-term Pell eligibility to short-term training and education programs and not just to accredited four-year programs. And it does that. It introduces Workforce Pell, which would allow funding to go to students who are in those programs 150 to 600 hours in high-demand industries. They must meet industry-recognized credentials, they must meet 70% completion and placement rates, and they must be approved by the U.S. Secretary of Education. And it also allows participation from both nonprofit and for-profit workforce providers, not just accredited colleges. And so there is a question mark about what it means in terms of for-profit credit providers and to what extent those criteria around high quality will be enforced among people who are evaluating this approach. Many people rely on childcare, affordable childcare, and as working parents, and many people as working family caregivers rely on home care workers and direct care workers. In this budget, there are calls to eliminate key programs which significantly would reduce childcare assistance. It would not provide any specific increases for childcare support, despite this ongoing concern about childcare affordability. It would create drastic cuts to aging and long-term care services. It would dissolve the Administration for Community Living, which is the federal agency that was created to support older people and people with disabilities. It would eliminate the long-term care ombudsman program. My aunt, Becky, was an ombudsman in Pueblo, Colorado growing up. She's the person who would investigate cases of abuse in nursing homes for older people, and she would serve as their advocate. This budget would eliminate that program. Demands collaboration, especially when you disagree, right? You disagree along party lines. You disagree across personal experience. You disagree across what field or sector you're in, right? You imagine what are the unified approaches that you can take in this moment, because what you see is not just one piece of the pie, but bigger pies. You see a shared prosperity model, right? We must center the most vulnerable people in those realities. I mentioned several populations. I would also add caregivers and immigrants, returning citizens, and low-income people across the spectrum. This deservingness mindset needs to go away, right? That my issue deserves it and yours doesn't. We must think about the ways in which we can look at history and so many examples across history, from the New Deal era and economic reforms to the Civil Rights era in '64 around dismantling segregation, to the environmental protection era in the 70s, to the AIDS movement in the 1980s, smoking campaigns, anti-smoking campaigns, and to the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act that transformed accessibility standards all over the country. We must not only protect the realities that those eras brought, but we must learn from them as we think about what it means to work across difference and find that unifying goal. So please, thank you so much for inviting me here to speak. I leave you with some final questions that really speak to the defining moment that we're in. I thank you for your unity, your resilience, for your shared purpose. I encourage you again to think about collaboration, not fragmentation, and to note that the stakes are high for working people, for learners, and for families. Let's build a system that's worthy of our people, one that values every worker, every learner, and delivers on the promise of opportunity for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza. That was fantastic. It takes a great presenter to power through technical difficulties, and it takes a great audience to power through technical difficulties as well. So thank you all. And thank you to our virtual attendees as well. I know that they were affected. Unfortunately, that also affected our recording, so we'll do our best to get the materials out. So, Mr. Espinoza, let's open it up for some questions, please. We have 3 runners in the audience with microphones. Can you raise the microphones high above your head so they can see you? All right. If anybody has a question, raise your hand. We got one down front.
What an incredible presentation and speech. Thank you so much for, I just met you and your brilliance. I just wanted to say your brilliance. I was curious about, like, when we talk about polarization, in my career, I did work on the national level for people with disabilities to get in-home services recognized and supported in the same way that nursing home care is, and PHI was part of that discussion. And what I recollect, fortunately I don't recollect you, but maybe you were in the crowd in terms of how did PHI, like, it could maybe give us some insight on how to work around polarization, because I remember discussions with PHI as a person with a disability, like there was a gap that we had, for the organization at PHI as well as people with disabilities talking about this. Workers are essential, and also people with disabilities are not just objects to charge Medicaid for and to receive clients, or we're not clients, we were partners. So I was just curious, I wonder if there's some tips we could learn from that experience for today as we move forward to that May 12th date and onward. Thoughts? What do you think?
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you for bringing visibility to that issue about how do you create, at least in the care or services and support system, a model that centers both the needs of the care recipient and the caregiver, right? I think there are some lessons from PHI and from many other advocates who work in that sector, in those sectors, I should say, right? The first thing I'll share is that when I joined PHI, it was 2016, and it was a year that a major federal change was being debated. It was the Fair Labor Standards Act, which had been introduced under the Obama administration several years before that, and it aimed to ensure wage protections for home care workers who had been excluded from those protections since the 1930s during the New Deal, right? During that era, this was a moment in which home care workers, domestic workers, and agricultural workers were excluded by Congress from those wage protections because that job wasn't seen as real work, right? And because the majority of workers were Black and Latino workers, typically women, right? And so the Obama administration changed that, but the discussions around it the risk was that if we moved too quickly, that states didn't have the money to increase wages that quickly, and the people who would suffer would be low-income people with disabilities, people specifically at home, right, who didn't have family supports. Two things we did when I joined. I joined at the very end of that debate, so I had the opportunity to think about the next stage. We had a slogan that we tested. We worked with a firm in DC to test the slogan and PHI continues as its tagline, which is quality care through quality jobs, right? And it wasn't quality care and quality jobs. The through was really critical, right? That we saw them as interconnected, that the care you received as a person was shaped by the job the person had, but that the job the person had was going to be much stronger if the person was respected as an individual, right, in a person-centered model. And so we tested it. We tested it across aisles. We tested it across business leaders and policy leaders, et cetera. And what you do in that testing is you test, does your support for the issue increase or decrease when you hear it? And when people heard it, increase went through the roof. Like people just saw it. They didn't see themselves as either part of the services and supports world or part of the workforce world. They saw the interconnectedness of that and they saw our appeal. The second, and so I really would think language is powerful and framing is powerful. And sometimes we get a little too caught up in word usage, but I do believe that if the sentiment behind it allows us to rattle kind of the mindset to get us to a place where you can say, okay, I agree with that. Like you can make a major, major difference. The other piece that we did is that we dedicated quite a bit of resources and we did fundraising in this regard to do storytelling that was structural. And so a lot of storytelling that you see in this country, it's a person testifies who they are. They offer, I went through this, then I went through that, and then we pull a quote and a photo, and that becomes a story. In reality, that's not a story, right? A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a problem. It has an overcoming of something. It has a transformation. And most stories tell the stories as if we're all experiencing challenges at the individual level, when in fact we're parts of societal systems that kind of trap that problem, right, and create it and reinforce it. And so we moved to a system that was strategic storytelling. Yes, we would center workers and their clients. We never did photos or stories without both. in that storytelling. But when we talked to Congress, when we talked to state leaders and to businesses, and we did digital media storytelling, we made sure that we always situated their individual challenges in the historical and in the systemic. And that's what I think we need. Because if we're going to solve the problem, we can't put it on people, on the individual business owner, on the worker themselves, et cetera. We have to imagine the system around it as being the source of the solution. Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Espinoza? I see our mic runners. All right. Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Give him a big hand. All right. Before we release everyone to the breakout sessions, please note that we'll be back here for lunch at 12:30. This afternoon will include breakout sessions and a very engaging plenary titled Strategies for Diversifying Funding Opportunities, and that will be at 2:45. There will continue to be snacks and drinks outside the room if you need them, but please do join us here for lunch, and please enjoy this first set of fantastic breakout sessions. Thank you all.